Hey everyone, so before we get started, just a little disclaimer. This video is more of a compilation of a couple of clips that I put together months ago before I had all this cool equipment. So just bear with me while I drive through this Frankenstein of a video. But yeah, enjoy my first top 5. My first official top 5. Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Avery Fields, aka the Cinematic Noob, and this is Fields of Gold top.
Don't listen to me, it's top 5. It's actually top 5.
So if there's one curiosity that's remained consistent for me when it comes to creepy stuff, it's the Uncanny Valley.
The Uncanny Valley is the sliver of space between what we find acceptable as a human, a character that puts us at ease, for example, because of its exaggerated features, and what is accepted as a human being, and an element that is absolutely necessary in most horror films. What started that all off? I don't know, hyper-realistic paintings maybe? So today, we're going to explore some of my favorite creepy paintings in movies. This is my second top 10. The last one I did was, like I said in the last video, 7 years ago. I've completely changed the format and really want to try something different with this one. And moving forward in general, I just kind of have this affinity with like creepy. So I think that'll be kind of my thing. Hope you like this first addition to this type of top 10 that I'll be doing from now on. Yeah. Let's get right into it. Number 5. Hugh Crane's painting from The Haunting. The Haunting is a 1999 remake of the 1963 film The Haunting of Hill House, based on a book by Shirley Jackson written in 1959, and stars Liam Neeson, Owen Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Lily Taylor. It's about a group of sleep-deprived individuals who volunteer to stay at Hill House for a few days to be a part of a case study performed by our doctor, played by Liam Neeson. That's essentially what the story's about. The book kind of expands on a lot of other themes that this movie leaves out, but they explore them very subtly. In the recent TV show, The Haunting of Hill House, they explore them a lot more, but this film deserves its flowers. While the film has always been one of my favorites as a kid, I can acknowledge just how not great it was, but that's not important. What is important is that some of the elements in the story were very well played, and I thought that if they had hyped them up just a little bit, it could have been one of the creepiest movies ever made, I think. One of the better elements of the film is the suspense surrounding the painting of the owner of the house, or the previous owner, I should say, Hugh Crane. This like 15-foot painting looms over the main living space, I guess you could call it, and every once in a while they make interesting references back to it, including one where our lead, Eleanor, is distraught after seeing the painting has been destroyed by someone, that someone being her, and she doesn't even know it yet, which gave it a very interesting look for a while in the film. I chose this one because while it's not inherently a creepy picture, or at least to my standard, what did really stick out for me growing up was just the size of the thing. It's just, I don't know, I've always been obsessed with paintings that were larger. Having said that, this one is extremely dark, and he's just staring menacingly, and you know that at some point during the film that painting is going to play a huge role, which it does towards the end when he makes his grand appearance. Number 4. Nikki, Vampire in Brooklyn. Eddie Murphy takes a walk on the dark side in this surprisingly eerie tale about a vampire named Maximilian who lands in Brooklyn and eventually decides he has to find his bride. Only the second time, Eddie Murphy had to land in New York City to find his bride for some reason. he eventually finds a potential suitor in Detective Rita Vedder, who is apparently very bad at what she does. She is played by the great Angela Bassett. While, just like The Haunting, it's not the greatest film, there are several things about it that make it very memorable for me. The star-studded cast, there are so many great names in this film. The set design, which looks like it came out of a Tim Burton film at times. And, of course, Eddie Murphy doing Eddie Murphy shit. But I love the creep factor most of all. There are actually a few scenes that are genuinely disturbing. Throughout the story, we get glimpses of very dark images. Rita's character is having nightmares, and she's painting what she sees in those nightmares. This painting depicting a woman crucified on the top of a building. Throughout the earlier parts of the film, we also get a lot of visits from Rita's horny roommate, Nikki, who is very adamant about getting her swerve on at all times. While Maximilian has his sights set on Rita from the beginning and has already started making a move on her, she is initially uninterested, but at one point, Nikki comes across Rita's supposed leftovers, and what ensues is a very bloody event. At first, it's made to look like Nikki's moved out of the apartment, but we finally get a reveal of what happened to her. And what has happened to her is exactly what Rita's painting was depicting. Number 3. So this next one's a bit of a curveball because this movie is actually very hilarious. Directed by the Ethan and Joel Coen for the first time together. This rather dark comedy is also a remake based on the 1955 film by the same name. We have another star-studded cast, including Tom Hanks, Marlon Wayans, and J.K. Simmons, to name a few. This is the story about a band of thieves who are about to pull off the biggest heist of their career by robbing a casino. Their best means of doing this is by using a tunnel that's been dug all the way from the casino to the basement of a little old lady's house. We are talking about the best little old lady, Irma Hall. Naturally, in order to pull this off, they have to have access to the house, which leads them on a series of interesting hijinks to keep up appearances. Once the old lady starts to get a little curious about what's going on, and she is very sharp throughout the film, they make the decision that they have to get rid of her, and this does not bode well for any of them. They are each taken out one by one, completely by circumstance. Now, this part of the film is very, very unsettling on its own. But there's one scene in particular that stands out to me the most. Earlier in the film, the old lady, whose name is Marva, acknowledges a picture on the wall of her late husband, which she clearly expresses great love for and acknowledges how much she misses him. And this is a sweet sentiment initially. When Seema's character, the general, makes his attempt on the old lady's life, we get a couple of images suggesting that the painting of the old lady's husband is sentient somehow, and it's not until the general's death that we see the smug look on his face that suggests maybe he has something to do with these deaths. I'm sure that's not the case. Most people would probably just look at this painting as silly initially. When you're watching the film, you can't help but laugh at the painting making these faces, that is surprised that someone's coming upstairs, you know. But it's when he makes that smug look at the end that you're just like, that's unsettling. Number 2, The Conjuring 2, The Nun. The Conjuring 2 is an installment in a series of films that chronicle the experiences of the late Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were paranormal investigators back in the late 60s, throughout several decades actually. And if you don't already know, they were extremely popular. And like myself, many people were skeptics about how legitimate their practices were. But among the most popular cases were the Annabelle series and the Amityville Horror, to name a couple. The Conjuring 2, however, supposedly focuses in on one of the most documented cases that they have had, and the most documented cases of all time. The Enfield Poltergeist. Once again, we're not here to get into what's real and what isn't. I personally, again, have my skepticisms. But apparently, a family was haunted by a poltergeist at 284 Green Street in Enfield. And It led to some pretty interesting events that made world news, and the Warrens got involved. But we're not here to talk about any of that. Not for real. A common figure that is seen throughout the Conjuring portion of the universe, if you will, that they've created around the Warrens is the Nun, which we will also not get into the origin of, because that would require me to pay for an HBO subscription or something, and I can't do that right now. But it has become a very popular image. You've seen it many times. They use it in videos everywhere. But that image of that nun is one that's burned into anyone who's watched any of those films. At one point in the film, we realize that Lorraine has been haunted by the image of this nun several times throughout her dreams. And it's not long before we see that her husband, Ed, has also been haunted by this image. And so he does what any normal person would do after seeing something haunting in their dreams: paint it. This image in of itself is not really, again, by my standards, creepy, but it's just, suspense they build around it in the film. There are a lot of moments where you are just looking at the image and you don't know if you're looking at the image or if you're looking at the actual nun itself. I say itself because it is an entity at this point. We don't really know much about it. But yes, they do a great job of building up suspense. Whenever you're looking at it, you do feel uneasy. And for me, not because of the image, just because of the music that they play, because of the build up. You just don't know what to expect. You don't know if something's going to leap out of that picture. It is, again, that uncanny valley. That is what I find most interesting about this particular painting and why it has made this list. Number 1, The Voodoo Woman, Tales from the Hood. I'm pretty sure that anyone black watching this has seen this movie and already knows where I'm going with this one. A very early trigger for horror was an anthology type film called Tales from the Hood. It was produced by Spike Lee, came out in 1995. I was 6 at the time, and I'm pretty sure we watched it when it came out. My parents were wild. They made a second film recently, in the last 7 years or something like that. It's crap. Don't watch it, but also don't use it to judge the first one if you happen to see that one first. There's just no comparison. It primarily stars Clarence William III, Joe Torre, and Samuel Monroe Jr. as 3 actors who are consistent throughout the film. Although there's some great appearances by David Alan Grier, Roger Smith. I think I remember seeing Savion Glover in there. Maybe I'm mixing them up just because the guy has locks. Each of the separate stories explores very interesting themes that are common in the black communities, or at least as they were in the 1990s, and actually challenge some very, very important things that maybe we should consider today. But I believe it is the last story that features the object of this horror. We are introduced to our main character, who is a politician who is one of the most blatantly racist people I've ever seen in any kind of video. It's almost kind of cheesy how racist he is, but it works. The build up is kind of perfect for how sleazy he is. It doesn't feel like it takes me out of the story or anything like that. But he has decided to move into the home of a slave owner, and the house is shown to be an object of much hate by the community, especially the black community. Many of his supporters, as well as the people who obviously are not voting for this man, think it is a good idea for him to leave the house, not only for his political growth and lack of disrespect for people most affected by that house, but in one case, for his own safety. He's approached by an old man who gives him a very staunch warning that the house is cursed, and he may not be a fan of his, but if he wants to live, he should move out as soon as possible. And naturally, a man who has heard this warning many times before from the same person just decides to ignore it. After this politician's main guy is killed, in this house by an unknown force, which is chalked up to him tripping down a bunch of stairs, he decides that he's just gonna go home and push through because he's not afraid of whatever this story is, right? And what follows is one of the most, I can only imagine, horrific nights anyone can go through before they die. We see our guy making his way through the house, and there is a painting that he has acknowledged a couple of times throughout the story. He's even told us the story of what happened, how this voodoo woman has put a curse on the house. Obviously, he doesn't believe in that, but at this point, he's starting to stare at the picture with a little bit of concern. The many figures in the painting are missing. And it's over time that our guy is walking around with his shotgun trying to shoot these dolls that are very clearly running around this house that he's in and still is choosing not to leave. That we, as well as he, notices more and more of these figures are leaving the painting. It's not until he finally enters the room for the last time and realizes that all of the figures have left the painting, and he turns to find that he is faced with hundreds of bloodthirsty little black dolls, that he realizes that he's pretty much screwed. I'm sure you can imagine what happens next. What makes this one so disturbing is that initially you do not see where these figures are going, and you can only imagine when they're finding time to pop out of this picture. And we do see the first few figures run around the house, and he can see them as well, which is why he shoots at them with his shotgun. But when you start realizing that you don't know where these things are in the house, and they're clearly connected to the amount of figures on this painting, you think that your pride would completely just go out of the window and maybe you try to leave the house. That's always baffled me, but I guess we needed to see our racist politician get killed, and it is a very satisfying ending to this man. I'm not even gonna lie, he's intensely racist throughout this part of the film.
So, I hope you enjoyed the first installment of my top 5 segment. As you can tell by my hair, it has been a while since I first started making this video, but a lot has happened in the meantime. I ran into quite a few technical difficulties, and as you can tell from the beginning of this video, it used to be a top 10, but the video started getting way too long. And to be honest, I had even creepier paintings to share in this video initially, but the audio from the clips that I didn't include was damaged, so I was trying to figure out a way to make sure I used the footage that I had. That mixed with the idea of wanting to put videos out in shorter bursts just came down to me doing a top 5, which just made sense after a while. So now that I have new mics and new cameras and all that good stuff, I'm ready to rock out, and I'm ready to bring some way more exciting content. For now, if you enjoyed this video, drop a like, and if you didn't, tell me why, and also just list some of your favorite creepy paintings and movies. Maybe I'll include them in my next video if they weren't already in line to be in the part 2. This is Avery Fields, aka the Cinematic Noob, and I'm out. No, that's not it. The vision is at hand. That's the one.